and currently serving as a co-chair of the Warren County Front Royal Appalachian Trail Community Committee. I'm also a longtime Boy Scout leader. Been with them for 18 years, currently with a venturing crew that's here in Front Royal. And our venturing crew is all about the backcountry and the outdoors and high adventure activities. So we spend a lot of time hiking and backpacking, river sports, wilderness skills, and things like that. And also just a founder and guide with a local women's hiking group, the Trail Tribe. A little bit about myself too, lifetime spent in the woods, camping, hiking, all sorts of activities, whether it's on the river or just in the woods, building forts as a kid, playing creekside, you know, fishing, catching crawdad, those type of things. And it's a personal mission of mine to bring as many people as possible into the outdoors, because nature is very restorative, healing, and it's a great place to recreate and just find some solitude and peace. And it's a great place to socialize with people. And of course, with COVID right now, it's probably the most popular place that people are heading to effectively enjoy an activity and social distance and still be with people. That's a little bit about myself. You'll see on this slide that my middle name is in quotes and it's Goldilocks. That happens to be my trail name. So it is tradition in the hiking community, particularly along the Appalachian Trail, to give each other trail names. And this particular one was given to me a number of years ago. I was through hiking well, not through hiking, section hiking really. I was just section hiking the New Jersey portion of the Appalachian Trail with my 3 sons. And at the time, my name was Venture Bear, which was kind of a nod to being a venturing advisor. And I walked into this group of through hikers and introduced myself, and they start laughing. And one of them said, "You're not Venture Bear, you're Goldilocks," because behind me were my 3 sons. So we became Goldilocks and the 3 bears, and it's kind of stuck. So I just share that little story with you. A little bit about this Appalachian Trail Community Committee that I chair. I don't know if anybody knows what an Appalachian Trail Community is. It's actually a program by the Appalachian Trail Conservancy, which is the organization that oversees management of the Appalachian Trail that extends for like 2,100 miles between Georgia and Maine. So they designed this program to recognize communities along the trail that promote and protect the Appalachian Trail. So towns, counties, and communities along the AT's corridor are considered assets by all that use the AT, and many of these towns act as good friends and neighbors. So through a multi-step process, a community volunteer group creates programming and establishes partnerships to meet the designation criteria. And our community completed that process and was designated in 2012. And I was happy to serve on that committee and as the scouting liaison. And that's how I got initially involved, is bringing the scouts in our community into this activity to have our town and county designated as an AT community. Another interesting part of this program is that it's to assist communities with sustainable economic development through tourism and outdoor recreation while preserving and protecting the trail. Local businesses get involved local businesses that actually give back to the hiking community in a lot of different ways. A lot of our local businesses provide discounts to through hikers, provide services like the brewery company and Down Home Bakery and Mountain Trails open base camp, which provide our through hikers with free showers and laundry services and a place to store their gear while they're wandering around town. So businesses like that become AT business sponsors, and they will get a decal to go on the front of their establishment. And they also get access to links to the ATC website and recognition of their efforts on social media. So they get a lot of free advertising And so if you see this logo as a decal on a storefront, then you know that that business supports the hiking community in our area. And so I encourage you to go in and patronize them and to thank them for their support, because we actually in our community have the highest number of business sponsors of any community along the Appalachian Trail. And I think that says a lot about our community. It is a hiking community. There's great support for hikers, and you know, having this many businesses come together and partner to support the hikers is kind of a neat accomplishment for us. And so I just encourage you to look for that decal and support them. Okay, so I thought we'd just start a little bit with some images of winter landscapes. And as we go along, I might point out a couple of things, because sometimes people think that winter hiking just involves snow and ice. But as this picture clearly shows, I'm on my favorite trail. Some of you probably know which one that is. And it looks like a beautiful fall day, but this actually was I think it was in January of last year. This was in December 2 years ago. And this was actually Christmas morning, crisp, cold day. An interesting thing to think about for winter hiking. It looks like an absolutely beautiful day, but the cold does change the landscape a bit. The ground will be frozen, so it's very different from hiking other times of the year. This particular morning, there was a little bit of frost, so some areas of the trail were a little slick. And here's another winter photo. It's up at the Dickey Ridge Visitor Center, and you see it's all shrouded in fog. So you have a lot of variety of weather conditions during the winter. And so that's some of the things we're going to talk about tonight, so that you're adequately prepared for these outdoor adventures. And yes, during the winter, you're still going to see a lot of moss and lichen and mushrooms, which is kind of surprising, but it also makes for, you know, some fun outings to go looking for these things and to see what's around. Now, this may be what you're envisioning for winter hiking. This was a snowstorm 2 years ago, and I was hiking along Easton Park and over to Shenandoah National Park, but it was an absolutely lovely day. But we weren't the only ones putting tracks in the snow. There were quite a few other people out there as well. Here's another view of the river from Easton Park. Just another view. I just thought it was kind of cool. We could see maybe, I was hoping to see maybe a bird or a squirrel stick its head out, but because that's the other thing I love to look for when we're out in the woods, especially when there's snow on the ground. It's looking at the tracks and trying to figure out what made the tracks. And I have been known to go off trail a little bit. I know we're not supposed to leave no trace, but I have been known to go off trail a little bit and follow the tracks and see where that animal went to. Another favorite pastime of mine when it's really cold is to hike along this section of the Dickey Ridge Trail, because there's a creek that runs alongside it, and it's to see these really cool ice sculptures that form as the water's passing by. I don't know if it's water vapors that condense and create these different forms, but they're always cool to look along and see what we can find. You know, what is nature leaving for us? I find them very beautiful and just ever surprising, because you never know what you're going to find. Now here along these branches, you can see there's like the icicles are forming down, reaching towards the water. Just stunning. Here's another favorite place of mine. I like to sit here a lot and just contemplate the world, or not think at all, and just take in nature. Just some more ice. And this is on top of the stream, and I like how it's kind of also captured the leaves and things like that. Some picture of some ice coming down rocks. You'll find a lot of this up in Shenandoah National Park as the water flows down the rocks and it freezes. It's also a great time to visit some of the waterfalls and see what ice formations are there. This was on a backpacking trip, and I call it, you know, hiking through Narnia, because of the mountain laurel there. The way the snow was kind of on it, it just made for this really magical experience. You really felt like you were walking through Narnia. It was just an amazing experience. So I do encourage you to, you know, when there is snow on the ground, to take that opportunity and see what that feels like. In this case, we were backpacking, and you see that my partner there has got hiking poles. And I would say that when there is snow on the ground, that hiking poles are an absolute must, because you don't know, the ground could be slick, the snow, the ice, and it will help you with your balance. Just some other views. This is in Maryland along the Appalachian Trail. Just, you know, a lovely environment with the snow on the ground. This is by Weaverton Cliffs. You can kind of just see the whole stretch there in view. Just here I was just kind of illustrating the starkness and the beauty between the darkness of the trees, the blue of the sky, and then the white of the snow, how it just kind of made everything quiet, but yet clean. And it was pretty quiet, except we heard the dropping of the snow and the slush. And that's another different sound that you get in winter, particularly when there is snow, is when it is snowing, you can hear the snowflakes hit the trees and the leaves and things like that. And then when the slush is falling, it's a little bit different than raindrops. So it's kind of, it has its own lyrical, this lyrical musicality to it. And it's really interesting to experience that. This is just another view of snow. Again, just different views of things you might experience when you're out there for winter hiking. How snow falls and stays captured on tree branches. And this is things that I, you know, just notice and try to pick up as I go along and wonder about it. Yeah, this is when I was in Maryland backpacking, and I included this picture just to take a look so you can see what's hanging off me. You see my gloves are off and they're kind of tucked down with my chest strap. You see around my waist, I have at least 2 different articles of clothing that are tied around my waist. I do have a hat on, I have my hiking poles, but I just wanted to kind of look at that image for a minute, because when we're talking later, you'll understand why I look like that. Because I find with winter hiking, it's all about regulating your body heat and your sweat, and it becomes an exercise in putting layers on and taking layers off, and putting them on and taking them off. So here you see I'm in some stage of taking off layers. Interesting, I included these were first day hikes that we've participated in the last few years, and it's interesting, first day hikes January 1st. We had no snow for the past few years. So here I was at the Tom Floyd Wayside Shelter, and it looked like a beautiful autumn day, but it was gorgeous. It was a balmy day actually, and very crisp, and the air was very clear, and it was a gorgeous day to be out there. It really actually was balmy. It was probably in the 40s that year. Last year we had a gathering up at the Denton Shelter, and again it was a gorgeous day. We invited people from the community to join us at the shelter. They were invited to start from different locations. We had hike leaders at each location that brought the hikers along the Appalachian Trail. We wanted them to have that experience, to be on the trail, and also to meet us here at the Denton Shelter, where we had a campfire and hot cocoa and s'mores. And thankfully, over 50 people joined us that day. Different hiking groups showed up, people with their children, people with their dogs. And it became a very festive atmosphere to just, there's one of the puppies now, to just join with like-minded people and meet new people. In fact, I think there's some people in this group tonight that I met last year at this event. Here's a little view of our campfire and some of our materials that we shared. And here was this from this year. This year, unfortunately, because of COVID, we're unable to have any in-person events. But I got out anyway and went to a favorite place. You see that rock behind me? The face kind of looks like a sea turtle. This is Patience. She's on the Dickey Ridge Trail, and I hike to her regularly because by the time I get to her, I've kind of just discarded all the icky stuff in life, and I've usually gotten some patience and clarity restored to my life. So she's a good stopping point. She's also the mascot for the trail tribe. Okay, this picture I wanted to include, and it's called Boots on the AT, and yeah, you can see those are my feet, those are my boots. I wanted you to take a look at the boots particularly, and just note that they are getting a little damp and wet. And yes, those are waterproof boots, but we're going to talk about that in a few minutes as to why boot selection and keeping your feet dry are important. This is just another shot. This is over in Linden. The Appalachian Trail crosses this railroad track over in that location. Okay. This is the Dickey Ridge Trailhead. I think this was about 6 inches of snow. Really fun to tromp through. And just a comment, hiking through snow is quite different from any other hiking. You are going to use muscles that you didn't know you had. Even if you're a well-conditioned hiker, you may find that you're sore the next day. Because when you're hiking in the snow and the ice, you really can't see the ground, so you really don't know how uneven it is. So you're constantly checking your balance, checking your feet. You might be slipping a little bit. You're constantly doing that. And plus, you know, if you're going into 6 feet of snow, you've really got to lift your feet up higher to take the next step. And if you're breaking the trail, if you're the first one putting in tracks, it's a lot of work. So I just mentioned that, and that's one of the things about winter hiking in snow to consider, because you are exerting a lot more energy than you normally would. So that is a consideration, and we'll talk a little bit later about water needs, hydration needs, and also fuel. Food, you know, what you need to keep fueling your body, since you will be exerting a lot more energy. Another favorite part, this is on Route 522 here in Front Royal. So if you park at the trailhead here and cross the street, you will come to this kind of gate. It's near the Smithsonian Center there. And from here, you keep going north, you'll end up at the shelter, the Denton shelter that I showed you a picture of earlier. Okay, and this is just a photo to illustrate more that you can find a lot of plantations still growing during the winter. You see a lot of different mushrooms here on this log, and you see some green vegetation. I'm often quite surprised what we find growing during the winter months. Okay, so let's get started with the real important stuff, safety. And of course, I'm a scout leader, so my mantra is be prepared. So a couple of things to keep in mind. Start early and hike with the sun. It is winter, the sun is not out as long. As soon as the sun starts going down, so does the temperature, and conditions on the trail can change very quickly. The other thing I always recommend is whatever you're hiking, have a plan and make sure that somebody has that plan, whether it's somebody back at home or with a friend, so that when you get off the trail, you can connect with them and say, hey, I made it back. Somebody that you can trust, that if they don't hear from you, or they try to connect with you and they don't hear from you, that they know where you are, so if they have to send out a rescue party, they know where to start. The next thing is plan your hike, look ahead, check trail reports. So you can go to a number of resources for that, which were in the chat. Some things that are good to look at are hiking groups that you might find on Facebook. I noticed that a lot of people will post the hikes that they did maybe that day or the day before, and some of them are really good at providing trail conditions. And they'll say, oh, I did this particular trail today, there's ice, there's snow, whatever. So that's always helpful. Some of the trail maintaining clubs also have Facebook pages, and they will give condition updates as well. You can also check with some of the parks and check their telephone lines, or just check some of their web pages to see if they have an update on conditions in the park. It's always important to check, especially if you're driving a distance and you're hoping to maybe park at a particular boundary trailhead. If there's snow on the ground, you don't know if that trailhead parking lot has been cleared or not, and if there's going to be a place for you to park safely. So it might be good to check ahead of time. Also, check your weather forecast frequently. You know, if you've planned a few weeks out that you're going to do this particular hike, keep checking in the days leading up to the hike, and always check that morning. Checking on your temperature, checking for precipitation, wind speed. Now, yes, I did include here avalanche reports. I know that's not really as appropriate maybe where we are living. I don't think we've had one recently. But in some areas, it might be important to check that sort of thing. And also check your daylight hours. When is the sun going to set? So that you can really plan when to start and when you expect to be out, so that you know you have a safe hike and you're hiking in the daylight. Also think about where your hike is taking you elevation-wise, because if you go up above tree line, there could be limited visibility due to high winds. Just some other tips: be flexible, turn around if conditions worsen. And that is something when you're hiking, you should, you know, keep checking the weather around you. Like, just be aware of what's going on around you. And, you know, every once in a while, take stock and do I continue or do I turn back? Like, what's the best option to follow? And also, be prepared to stay overnight in the forest due to an injury or a change in the weather conditions. There have been quite a few stories that I've heard during wilderness first aid training of people getting injured, or they're out there hiking and, you know, a blizzard blows in and they have to hunker down for the night. So that's something to consider, particularly if you're going into like the national forest or something like that and you're going to be on a long hike. You might want to consider carrying some items that's for survival, and we'll talk about those as well. Do we have any questions on this particular section? I know there's a lot of different things to think about in terms of planning a hike, where to go, and these different items. Does anybody have any questions specific to that? Okay, I don't see any questions posted. We'll move on. Okay, we're going to talk about gear. And this is a picture of me in some typical winter gear. Yes, I'm wearing hiking pants. I do have a medium weight smart wool, merino wool base layer under them. You see that I do have a fleece with a down jacket over it. I'm also wearing a merino wool base layer top under that. Gloves. I also have a fleece headband on. This is just for a demonstration of what you could be wearing. There are other items you can select as well. This is just an example. In this particular photo, it's snowing, so there's precipitation. So both my partner Golda and I, over our general hiking clothes, which I just showed to you, we're wearing raincoats. Actually, she's got I think a 2-in-1 insulated down jacket type thing, but both of them serve as a sheltering piece to help keep us dry from the precipitation. Okay, so we're going to talk about the layering principle. And this layering principle, you'll see, goes through kind of every section of clothing that you might put on your body, not just your body, but your hands, your head, and also your feet. So it's called the WISE principle, W being for Wiccan. So first and most important is no cotton. So you really want to look for a smart wool or a synthetic, because this is a next to the skin base layer. It's warm and effective for moving body chilling moisture, your sweat, away from your skin and out of your clothing system. So this layer should be form-fitting without being constricted. So there are a lot of options out on the market. It depends on your price point and what you feel comfortable in. The I is for insulation. And that's an insulating layer, typically a fleece or a down jacket, which will provide the majority of your warmth. And as a general rule, the thicker the insulating layer, the warmer it will be. Just keep in mind that you may not need this layer during periods of heavy exertion. So if you remember that picture I showed you before where I had all these things tied around my waist, well, we had really been hiking and we were actually going up in an ascent. So we were working hard. So yeah, I was taking those layers off. And we'll talk about why it's so important to monitor your sweat in a few moments. So the S and Y's is for sheltering, and that's the outer layer. It protects you from wind and precipitation. Depending on conditions, depending on where you are, it could be an ultralight windbreaker, a breathable and water-resistant soft shell, or a fully waterproof but less breathable hard shell. And that could be a Gore-Tex material or some equivalent to that. There are some new technologies out there coming out that are even better than Gore-Tex. So they are a bit pricey, but I'm sure we're going to see some price changes soon on that. And then last thing, E is for extra. And that's an extra layer. So in event of changing weather or an emergency or an unexpected night out, it's really good to have an extra layer for insulating purposes. And in this case, you might want to consider a down vest to cover your core, or one of those big puffy go over everything down or synthetic fill jacket. Okay, so, oops, sorry about that. Okay, so the reason we're talking about layers is that sweat is definitely your nemesis on cold weather adventures. It really, if you don't monitor it and you get really wet and you have to slow down because of the cold, it can lead to some, serious medical conditions. So we want to prevent that. So hike slow and steady, not fast and sweaty. Don't overlayer. Sense your sweat. So if you start feeling that you're getting sweaty, don't be afraid to stop and take off a layer. And just be, so you might want to take off that fleece layer and just leave the down jacket, or take the down jacket off and just leave the fleece later, like you saw in the picture where I was modeling what I normally wear. And then you saw in the other picture, I had 2 of my layers off at that point. All I had was a base layer and my down jacket, but my sheltering layer and my other fleece layer I had taken off. Also ventilate. A lot of jackets now, particularly your outer layer with the Gore-Tex, they'll have like zip pits that you can open. You can open the front of your outer layer just to ventilate so that perhaps it releases more of your heat so you're not sweating. And again, I can't emphasize enough, don't wear cotton because it holds on to all wetness. And it just doesn't dry quick, and it'll chafe you and it'll be uncomfortable. And so, yeah, let's not do that. So it's important to minimize how much you sweat. And the best way to do that is, look at your pacing and also look at your layers. And it's something, just keep monitoring and make adjustments as you go along. Okay. The other thing just to mention with the layering, something I've learned myself is don't try and put on too many long sleeve layers. Typically 1 form-fitting base layer and 1 warm mid layer, like a thick fleece, and 1 outer layer is great. But if you go to put on another long sleeve layer, it tends to really restrict your arm movement. And you get really restricted. It's just uncomfortable. So that's when it's great to have a vest, because you can put a vest in between or over top, and you still have all your ability to move your arms and whatnot. And this is where one of those super puff jackets might come in handy too, because that can go over everything and still be easy to move around in. Okay, before we move on to gear, I don't know how many of you hike with children or grandchildren, so I just thought real quick we'd go over just some guidelines for layering, the little ones and people of different ages. For all ages, the WISE system still is in effect. So, you need a base layer close to the skin that wicks moisture away, an insulation layer to retain natural heat, and it's recommended like a wool sweater or a fleece jacket. And again, no cotton, make sure it's a synthetic or wool. And then the shell layer to keep wind and rain out so that the other layers can still work. And the layer should be breathable, but wind and waterproof. If you're hiking with an infant under a year of age, just remember that they are not expending any energy. Well, at least not as much as you are, because they're sitting in your pack. So while you're huffing and puffing up the steep slope, creating heat and sweating, the infant on your back is just along for the ride. So make sure they're wrapped up. Wrap up those babies. And just make sure the layers aren't too tight and that you've left an opening for breathing. Also think about their faces. If they're exposed to the cold or wind for too long, that you need some sort of wind protection for them. Many of the backpacks and carriers or some of the trailers that have detachable panels that protect the kids from the wind and the rain and the blowing snow. So that's something to think about if you're going out with an infant. If you're with toddlers from 1 to 3 years old, they're starting to move. They may want to walk for a bit. Of course, it gets a little bit trickier because they need freedom of movement. Otherwise, they're going to get really frustrated. But yet, you still need to kind of layer them up to keep them warm because, they're still only 1 to 3. They're going to walk a little bit, but they may not walk as far as you do. So they may end up in a carrier as well. Or they may want to take a lot of breaks, and that's totally up to how your family hikes. But these are all considerations to keep in mind when you're preparing your children for an outdoor adventure. When you move into the next age group from age 4 to 10, these kids are, they're more mobile. I see some of these kids in these ages and they can hike. They can put in the miles. So it's important to keep them comfortable and safe, but you may have to spend a little more time monitoring how they're heating up. Where are they warm and not sweating? So that if they start sweating, and it might be, do a little buddy check, how are you doing? Are you sweating? And then have them shed the layers that they need to shed. Because you really also, for them, you don't want them to build up a lot of sweat. And then when they stop moving, they get chilled down really quickly. The other thing to remember, personal experience, make sure they're not so tightly bundled that they can't go to the bathroom on their own. Because sometimes they may wait a little too long to tell you that they need to go, and then trying to get all those layers off could result in an accident instead. So that's something to think about as well. Once you get to the preteen and your teens, pretty much you just layer them like adults. Keep in mind they'll be producing more and more sweat, and they may not, want to always listen to you when you tell them what to wear. They're becoming much more independent in their choices. But make sure you're trying to encourage them to wear the synthetic or the wool options instead of their favorite cotton hoodie. Especially if you're on an extended backcountry adventure, it really is important to make sure that they're dressed appropriately. I mean, if you're going on a little short hike and, it may not be as a big deal, but if you're going on an extended hike, definitely make sure they're dressed properly. Okay. Any questions about the layering system or specific questions about that before we move on to other gear that's important to our outdoor adventures? Okay. I don't see that anybody's typing a message, so I'll take that as a good sign. Oh, what is a super puff jacket? Oh, that's a good question. So if you saw the in that one image of me, I had a down jacket that was pretty form fitted, and that's actually a Ghost Whisperer, a Mountain Hardwear Ghost Whisperer. There are some puffy jackets that they're a little bit higher down fill, but they do look puffy. Almost makes you look like like the Marshmallow Man or the Michelin Man, where you look really, really puffy. And they're just a thicker, they're usually synthetic, or they're some are down filled and they're just a higher down rate, but they're just bigger and puffier, and they do retain heat really well. So it definitely looks, that's why they call them a puffer jacket. They do look very puffy. I hope that answers your question. There are quite a few options on the market for that. A lot of them, like the jacket that I was modeling, that stuff's into its pocket, which is something really small, so you can carry it easily. A lot of these super puff jackets also pack down pretty small as well. So if it's something that you just wanted to carry it for a while when you actually stop to have lunch, or you're backpacking and you get into camp and you just want something to throw on for an extra layer to stay warm, that's a great option if you choose not to carry a vest. So I hope that answers your question. All right. Oops. Okay. Let's talk about other gear, and keep in mind that as we go through gear, I may mention this layering, or I might say you might hear something in threes, and it's kind of referring to the layering system. When I talk about gear, I personally think your most important piece of gear are your boots. You take care of your feet. Your feet will take care of you. Okay. For winter hiking, there's a lot of different ideas about what's appropriate, and I will tell you straight off, the most important thing to do is get professionally fitted, and talk with a professional about what activity you're engaging in, what are your feet needs, and talk with them through your options. You know, here, if we're doing like some real snowy hiking, a waterproof or insulated boot is definitely a great way to go. I wear a regular hiking boot in the winter, even in snow, but they are waterproof. It's a Loa Renegade. It is waterproof. I do maintain that waterproofing every, especially if I've been hiking in a lot of water situations, a lot of rain, I will reapply waterproofing agent on a regular basis to keep them waterproof. That photo I showed you where the boot was looking like it was getting damp, something that I could wear with that to prevent the boot from getting as wet is a knee-high gaiter. So a gaiter will cover the top of the shoe and go up the leg, and you can get them in both a Gore-Tex material or a waterproof material. Mountain Trails here in Front Row in Winchester has a couple of options, but it's a great way to keep both your boot and then the bottom of your pants dry as well. They are very helpful. I've also used them as a sit pad. If I'm out there in the snow and I decide I want to, you know, sit and have a snack, but everything's covered in snow, those things come off and put in there because they're waterproof, so they're a great way to create a dry space to sit. Other things to think about. So again, on the boots, there are some insulated boots. I have a pair of Merrells that are insulated. They actually come up over the ankle, up the leg shaft a bit, and they are they have zippers up the back, but you can tie. They have laces as well, so you can adjust the tension so that if you need greater support around your ankles, you can adjust it. And I have hiked once or twice in them. I prefer a regular hiking boot. I find the insulated boots is great when I'm shoveling snow, but I don't find that I have the same flexibility I need in them when I'm regularly hiking. Now, I may feel different if I was like in New England somewhere in the mountains up there, but for around here, I'm finding that my regular hiking boot is working fine. I will adjust the socks that I wear, either to a thicker winter weight sock or a thicker wool sock, or there are options in terms of like a triple sock combo. So you might want a liner sock, a vapor barrier liner, and then the thick wool sock over the top of that. So again, it's that layering system. The vapor barrier liner adds warmth and it prevents the foot sweat from saturating your thick wool socks. So it keeps your feet drier and toastier. Because once those wool socks get too wet, you're gonna have a hard time drying them out and keeping because once they get too wet, your feet are just gonna get cold, and that's just a miserable place to be in. So that's something to think about in terms of layering what's on your feet for keeping them dry and warm. And there's a number of, I'm pretty sure mountain trails have a number of options in terms of sock liners and those vapor barrier liners. I know that River and Peak used to carry them, so I'm pretty sure mountain trails does too. The other thing, hiking poles. I've mentioned them already, that hiking poles are really essential, I feel, especially if you're hiking in snow, but also on a regular hike if there is no snow, because the ground is hard, it's frozen, and there may be slip places. Maybe there had been some rain or there had been some snow that melted, but now there's little pools of water or ice. Maybe there was frost the night before that hasn't completely thawed yet. The other thing to consider is that you could be hiking later in the day and it's a beautiful sunny day and that top layer is melting and now you're slogging through mud. So that creates a slippery situation as well. So having hiking poles really helps you maintain your balance. So I do recommend investing in a pair of poles and practicing with them and see how that works for you. There's a lot of options. If you've never used them before, you can get a really cheap pair at like Walmart. In fact, Walmart now has a budget-friendly outdoor line of equipment. But they've always had some cheap hiking poles. If you've never used before, you can at least try them out and see what you think without expending a lot of money. The next thing are gloves. And again with gloves, there's a layering option here as well. So you can have glove liners that are insulating and then cover that with a waterproof type glove as well. And the idea again is to keep that extremity, your hands, dry and warm as long as you can, because we have to keep an eye on our extremities because that's where you have the possibility of the medical conditions and situations, and we'll talk about them later too, and how to prevent or how to treat. You'll also something for your head. So, and in that case, you could think of a couple of things. There's a couple of, you could throw on a hat, maybe a scarf, a balaclava. But if it's really more extreme conditions, there's 3 core items that you typically think about, and it's a neck gaiter, which could be like the scarf, right? A liner balaclava, and then a windproof hat, not just, a typical, beanie would be helpful, but some sort of hat that's going to come down over your ears. And also think about, in some conditions, you may want a face mask and goggles. One of the things I think about in terms of this, particularly with winter hiking, if there's snow out and it's sunny, is sunglasses, because you don't realize how much glare is going to be off the sun while you're hiking. And sometimes you also want to consider sunscreen on your skin, because you can get sunburned when you're out there hiking in snowy conditions. Okay. Let's talk briefly about other pieces of gear that are very helpful for traction. And these are items that you would attach to your boot, and these images will show you how that works. So in this first upper left-hand photo is a lightweight traction option called Yak Tracks. And these are stainless steel coils, and they serve as points of contact between your boots and the ground. And they provide a lot of surface area stability. They're lightweight, they're portable, they're easy to use. They're best on packed snow, trails, or pavement free of steep icy areas. So this is a great option for daily walks on slippery sidewalks or non-technical hikes on snow-packed trails. I personally use these regularly, and I will tell you that photo I showed you of the backpacking trip in Maryland, one of my boots on that trip decided to fall apart. So the sole was coming off, and my Yak Track actually served a different purpose. It kept my boots together so that I could finish hiking off the trail that day. And so I hiked probably about 3 miles using the yak tracks just to keep my boots together, because we were slogging through a lot of slush and snow that day. And that's probably why my boots failed. They had been repaired twice already, and it was just too much water. The repair to the boot just couldn't hold together. So I usually throw these in my pack for winter hiking. You just don't know what's going to happen to you. After that experience, I was really grateful to have them, so I carry them all the time, even if I don't have snow. Another option over here in the upper right hand corner, these are micro spikes. This is a great choice for hard packed snow trails with moderate inclines and low angle ice. Now, similar to the yak tracks, they are lightweight. They're relatively easy to carry, but offer more stability and traction on icy terrain due to their steel spikes. The micro spikes are a safe go-to for winter hikes because they're easy to get on and off, they're durable, and they offer more grip than the coils. So you can see both of these options. You can kind of see how they just slip over the front, the toe of the boot, the toe box in the front, and just you slip them over along the heel, and they just slide on. And they do come in a variety of sizes to fit your particular size foot, so you don't have to worry about that. They do sell them in a variety of sizes. Then other options as you get into more extreme weather, down at the bottom left are crampons. And this is, think real technical terrain and serious mountaineering. So maybe if you're going to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, this is something you might need. These ice cleats are ideal for digging into snow and ice at any angle, and they offer the maximum stability on steep sections of a trail. The added front points there allow the hiker to grip into an vertical ice as well. These are serious hardware. They're constructed to be exceptionally strong and durable in steep, hard terrain. So they're definitely for experienced hikers and mountaineers and require training to use effectively. I could see if you're a real adventurer and wanted to do some serious climbing higher mountain peaks than we have here, you would invest in a pair of those. And then let's see. And then our last option here in bottom right are snowshoes. And unlike other traction devices that are designed for low snow conditions, these are great when there's fresh snowfall and before the snow gets packed down, because the snowshoes allow you to take advantage of the fresh snowfall and prevent you from expending too much energy plodding through deep powder. So you're going to stay more on top instead of, every time you put your foot plunging down, so spending all that energy just trying to get up and out of the snow. Because with the large surface area, they're designed to keep you afloat in the snow. Many snowshoes also have the benefit of added traction points for hiking on mixed surfaces. So these are a great option, and there are quite a few areas around here. I know Dolly Sods is popular when there's fresh snowfall to snowshoe. All right, let's move on to what is called the essential safety items to carry. And these are things, some of these things I personally feel you should have on every hike. You should always be carrying these items. There's some things here that may be even more essential for winter hiking. So a personal first aid kit, including medications. And this personal first aid kit, that's, Band-Aids, blister care, maybe some aspirin, some gauze, bacitracin, neosporin, things like that. One of the things I always include in my personal first aid kit in the winter are hand warmers. And these are extra hand warmers, so that if there is an emergency situation, I have extra ones on hand. Also carry whatever medications you need for the day, but I always carry an extra full day of medication. And that's just in case I end up having to stay out overnight. Then I have whatever medication I may need for the next day. Or if I'm injured and I know it's going to take the rescue team, they may not be able to come out that night. I may have to sleep out there till they can come get me the next day. So at least I'm covered for another day. Hand and toe warmers. So this is in addition to the extra set you put in your first aid kit. So these would be hand and toe warmers. They also have body-size body warmers, which I take on backpacking trips, but just on a regular hike, you might want to throw these in your bag. Sometimes they're good to break open, throw in your pocket, so you can put your hands in there if you need, if you're, need to a little extra warmth for your hands. Some people run colder than others, so it might be a nice option to have. An emergency blanket or bivy. A bivy is kind of like a sack that you can slide into. These are, you can get them pretty cheaply at Walmart, but they are important because if you have to end up out there overnight, you put the reflective side next to your body and it will reflect your heat back into you. I've also seen people who've created fires and little shelters, and they use the reflective blanket to reflect the heat from the fire back onto them. So there's a lot of different ways you can use the emergency blanket to stay warm. A stove and fire starter. I do think carrying some fire starters is definitely a good idea, whether you have lighter, matches, fuel cubes, fire sticks. Mountain Trails just told me they got some really cool new fire sticks that they will burn in the wettest conditions, even underwater, or so they've been tested. I haven't seen it yet. That's what I've been told. And then there's some other options for starting fire too. Just grab some dryer lint. Maybe prepare it and put in a little wax so it's really flammable. And a ferro rod. I also carry a pocket stove that has fuel cubes. It's really light, it's really small. But if I do want a cup of tea or coffee or something out there, or if I end up there overnight, I have a way to have a warm drink to keep my internal core warm. And it also gives me the materials to start a fire should I need one. Another important piece of equipment is map and compass. Now I know that a lot of people will have apps on their phone, whether it's AllTrails or something else that they use to follow their course. Those are great, but I would also suggest carrying a map and compass as a backup and to know how to use them. The thing that happens in winter conditions, because it's so cold, you may find that your phone battery runs down a lot more quickly. And if that and yes, you can prevent that as best you can. Maybe you put your phone in like a waterproof bag and have it inside your clothing somehow, so it's closer to your body to keep it warmer. You could use a hand warmer, one of those hand or toe warmers, and activate that and put it in that bag with your phone to try to keep it warm so that the battery doesn't run down as quickly. But I do recommend carry the map and compass, know how to do it. You never know, you might lose signal, or the battery runs down. What if you get stuck overnight and you just don't have a battery power? At least with a map and compass as a backup, even if you just print that section of the map that you need where you're at, maybe make a photocopy of it, you want the whole thing, but at least have something on paper to you keep it in a waterproof bag, just as a backup. Other things to carry: a headlamp and or flashlight with extra batteries. Again, battery issue. Cold might have a problem. Or just make sure before you go out you put fresh batteries in. But having a headlamp is important, because if you are out there longer than you anticipate and the sun goes down, you're going to need the headlamp to light your way. Or if you get stuck overnight, it'll be helpful to have that light. And again, I mentioned sunglasses or goggles and sunscreen, because with the snow and the sun, you definitely are have a possibility of sunburn. A couple of other things that you can carry is a pocket knife or multi-use tool. I carry a small one, always have one, like a scout knife. You never know when it's going to come in handy. 50 yards of paracord, a rain fly or tarp. Now there's a couple of options here. You could even carry a poncho, a rain poncho that could also serve as a rain fly or tarp if you get stuck out there overnight. It's just very useful in creating a shelter. Some other things that you can carry, I mentioned snacks, thermos of hot cocoa or tea or soup. We're going to talk about snacks in a few minutes, because there's a couple of considerations when you're selecting your snacks for hiking during the winter. And real importantly is you must carry water. Every hike you go on, please carry water. And in the winter, you have to think about drinking because it's not hot. I think when we hike in the summer, we're hot and we're sweating, so of course we immediately reach for the water. But in the winter, even though we're sweating, we don't always think to reach for the water because it's cold. So please carry enough water. You have to stay hydrated. If you get dehydrated, that is one of the beginnings of becoming like hypothermic. So we really can't stress enough. Carry enough water to stay hydrated, and make sure that you are thinking about it and sipping water as you go along. When I was a leader with the little Cub Scouts, we would stop every so often and say, "Okay, buddy, check first," and then we would do a water check. And that meant first they had to, take their buddy's hand and raise hands, and then everybody had to grab their bottle and take a drink. And so if you're out there and you hear my voice saying, buddy check, water check, then I hope that helps you to stay hydrated, because it really is important to stay hydrated. And it's important year round, but I just find in the winter, people just don't reach for the water as frequently, and it can lead to a lot of issues. Okay, some other things. Some other things to think about. An extra insulating layer of clothing. Now, we did talk about the Y system, and we have that E for extra. So I always carry an extra pair of wool socks. Even even just on a day hike, I carry it anyway, because if I happen to do a water crossing and slip into the water or my feet get wet, I want to have the ability to take those wet socks off and put dry ones on. And if you carry that extra layer, whether it's a vest or the puffy or something else, you can put that into your pack. And that's the other thing. Think about what size pack is appropriate for you to carry all these essential safety items. It's probably a day pack, but might be, because there's a little more items here, and it might be a little bigger than what you would use during the rest of the year for a day hike. But consider that. Find one that's comfortable for you. When we talk about backpacking, I always suggest that you get fitted by a professional. I don't know that you need that as much for a day pack, but you might want to go into a professional, store like Mountain Trails and see what they have available and discuss options with the staff. I find they're very knowledgeable and experienced, and maybe they can help you select the right one for the activity and for the amount of items that you'll be carrying. There are some people who say, some overnight survival items that are great to have are like a sleeping mat, particularly a closed cell sleeping mat. They look like those accordion things. You probably see a lot of hikers with them, particularly those that are backpacking. Some say a sleeping bag. I don't particularly carry that, but sometimes what I will carry is I have a down top quilt. It's actually from Costco. I made an underquilt and a top quilt for my hammock, and that top quilt condenses down really, really small. So you put it in one of those sacks and just get it really tight, and you might be able to carry it. And it's might save you out there. So it's something to consider. Some people will suggest some repair kits for like your stove. I always have duct tape strips on my poles. Of course, because if something breaks or I need to repair something, then I have that available. I can just peel it off the pole and use it. I will, one tip on your hiking poles, I have the telescopic type ones that you have to turn the knob and they extend. It's a little bit different technology. In really, really cold weather, sometimes the mechanism to tighten on the hiking pole doesn't always catch because it's really cold. And I will tell you that duct tape works really well to go into that space and hold the sections of the hiking pole in place. So that's maybe a consideration too when you're selecting a hiking pole if you're going to do winter hiking. I think those are all the things to consider to carry with you. We'll talk a little bit about some overnight considerations. If you are, you find yourself out there in the woods and you have to stay overnight, you know, think about a heat source and think about sheltering. So it might be good to work on some fire making skills. Think about, you know, where you're actually going to put the fire. A lot of times in this situation, you're not going to be in an established campsite that already has a fire ring. So you may be, you know, forced to create that for yourself. So, you know, think about which way is the wind blowing. Can you situate yourself like between your fire and rocks? Like maybe there's a rock wall or something so that the rocks will reflect the heat back on you. Do you have your emergency blanket? Can you use that as a reflective service? But make sure that you pick a space that's away from anything that might catch fire from stray embers, like tent or tarp, trees or bushes, and make a fire pit. So if you have to, clear an area of snow, dig a small hole in the ground, then surround it with rocks. If the ground is frozen and you can't dig down or you just don't have anything to dig with, then just build a pit with rocks from the ground up. And then find, you know, if you have your fire starter, pull that out, but you'll also need, you may need some other things maybe from around you to help with that, maybe some forest lichen. There is some particular forest lichen that is very good fire starter because it will burn for quite a while. I believe it's from the locust tree. You can also find bark from a dead tree or use that scout knife you have and make some wood shavings. That'll be helpful in starting the fire. I also recommend that you gather wood that you think you're going to need for a while. So prepare your area, you've got your shavings, but then also have ready the wood you need to start the fire, get it going, and then to keep it going. And there's really actually two different types of wood that you want for the different stages of your fire. So we've talked a little bit about the fire starter items, the kindling, but let's talk about the other two types and what you would want to do. So when you're collecting wood, the right wood would be wood that's dry. You don't want to be sawing off any big branches of a living tree because wood from a live tree takes a lot longer to ignite. It just won't catch fire due to its high moisture content, and that's not going to help you. So the only branches from a living tree that are worth using are the ones that are low hanging and they're already dry and like they break off really easily. And I find like on the conifer species are really great for that. And that's what we'll talk about briefly now. So the tree you get wood from makes a difference too. So dry wood from the conifer species is really great to start a fire. So evergreens, conifer species are evergreens. So trees that keep their leaves year round and have cones. So that's like cedar, pine, spruce, and balsam. Great to start a fire. Then once the fire is established, then you want to kind of move towards more deciduous species of trees. And those are the trees that shed their leaves in winter. So that would be your maple, your oak, or ironwood, and that's to keep the fire going. So you want to focus on getting that type of wood from fallen trees. Bark and branches are perfect for that. If you can't find any, then look for dead standing trees. And how do you know which trees are dead in the winter? Look for trees with their bark that's gone or peeling off with no fine branches, and that's kind of an identifying piece for you. And then, you know, once you have all your materials ready and you've collected enough, then you can start stacking your kindling. A lot of people like the teepee fashion, and then once it's started, then maybe you could take the larger ones and do a square shape around it. Just make sure that whatever shape you use, that you leave some space for air to get through, because fire needs both fuel, the kindling, but it also needs oxygen to feed it. So just make sure that you leave enough of that. And then if you're there throughout the night, remember that you're going to have to check it periodically and feed it. You know, you'll have to put more logs to it. If you're alone, you know, that's something you'll have to monitor yourself. If you're with a group of people and you're all stuck out there, then that's maybe a task that you can share with everybody else and take turns so you get some good sleep. A couple of other tips. If you're stuck out there, sleep with your water, fuel, and clothing for the following day with you to keep it warmer. You know, I've woken up with my Nalgene of water completely ice. And also some fuels, if you have a stove with you, some fuels, if they get too cold, they don't function well. So those are things that you might want to keep warmer. And of course, you know, you don't want to put on ice cold clothing the next day. That wouldn't be fun. Just some ideas. I mean, if you're out there and you get caught in a snowstorm or something, you're out there in this deep snow, you can, you know, create a little snow cave for yourself. One tip is to dig down into the snow wide enough for your body and long enough for you to lay in with your gear at your feet. You know, hopefully you have something to put down underneath, maybe your emergency blanket, or you have a tarp or a poncho or something. And if you have a tarp, you can put over the top of it too. So you can create this kind of little igloo effect in deep snow or in a bank of snow if you have nothing else. But I don't know that we really get enough snow around here for that, but it's, you know, use what you've got, right? All right. Any questions about some overnight considerations? Just check chat real quick. Okay. All right. Ooh, we're not gonna do medical emergencies just yet. We're gonna talk about snacks for a minute. It's very important to bring snacks and to consume them, because if you're out there in sub-freezing conditions and you're working hard, you are consuming a lot more calories than you realize. So you need enough energy to generate not just your body heat, but to be able to sustain the level of exertion that's required to do the activity that you're doing, whether it's hiking or snowshoeing or skiing, whatever it is. The challenge is that many common hiking snacks, chocolate, energy bars, cheese, they turn rock hard. They're jaw-breaking bricks in cold weather. So this not only makes them less pleasant and more challenging to eat, it can also discourage you from snacking as regularly as you should be. You can minimize the freeze effect by keeping a few desired snacks close to your body. There are some pieces of outdoor gear, jackets and whatnot, that have interior pockets. You could slip your phone in there or slip a bag of snacks or whatever in there, and then they wouldn't freeze solid in the first place. So that's one tip that you could do. But the other thing is to look at your favorite snacks and, you know what, let's test them out. Throw them in the freezer and see what happens. You know, throw them in the freezer for 24 hours, take them out and see what happens. I can tell you that crackers tend not to freeze too hard because they don't have a high moisture content. The only problem with crackers is they'll get really crumbly and they're bulky, and it's a little harder to package because you kind of need to keep them in a more harder container and not something collapsible. So that might not be a great idea, but you might have a great way to package them and take them. So if that works, great. And they are a good source of carbs, so it might be a good option. Nuts and seeds, they do get a little harder when they're cold, and they will feel quite cold in your mouth, but they will quickly break apart and warm up in your mouth, and it's great for chewing. And nuts and seeds are just great for dense energy. And they offer a great mix of carbs, fats, proteins, so things like pecans, cashews, almonds, pumpkin seeds, things like that. You know, you're a lot of it you'll find in typical trail mix that you can buy commercially. It's just some of those mixes you got to watch because they will have chocolate pieces in them, so they might be too hard to to nosh on. Dried fruit seems to work pretty well. It gets a little stiffer and chewier, but the more, they will soften up pretty quickly. They get more pliable after a couple of chews, so some effect from the cold, but not a huge deal. And dried fruit is great. It's a quick source of sugars and simple carbs when you need quick energy. Another favorite snack is beef jerky, and it's the same as dried fruit. The jerky is tougher and harder in the first couple bites, but it warms up to a normal consistency. But I think one tip is, in cold weather use, maybe find a jerky that's more tender, and it might be better, something like from Chef's Cut. But jerky is really great. There's a lot of muscle supporting protein in them. I mean, there's little in the way of fat or carbs, but it's worth carrying on the long, strenuous hikes because it really helps with your muscle rebuilding. Another popular snack are Fig Newtons or the fig bars from Nature's Bakery. And the same thing with them. They will get stiff than normal, but they warm up pretty quickly when you bite off a piece. They're quick digesting, and they're a good source of carbs for quick and sustained energy. One of my current favorites are the Energy Ball Super Snacks or the Figgy Pops. You may have seen them in the stores. They are great. They are dense. They are energy-packed snacks. They do, when they get cold, in the beginning are a little hard to like chew into, but they will get pliable and warm up pretty quickly. And they have like 50 calories per bite. So it's a great option. It's mostly carbs. They get a big thumbs up for winter use. I personally like to wrap them in the pre-cooked bacon. Really yummy, especially if you get the Figgy Pops that are the cocoa flavored, but that's just me, really like them. So something to check out if you haven't already. The winter snacks that are harder to carry, or you really got to give them special treatment if this is your go-to snack and this is what you want to carry, then really think about how you're going to transport them or where you're going to store them. And that's the chocolate and the cheese and energy bars and candy bars. I mean, they get really, really hard. I mean, it's like you're going to break your teeth on them. So you don't have to skip them if you keep them somewhere on you to stay warm. So that's something you can do if that's what's really your go-to snack, but just something to consider as you're going out and it's really cold out. Think about where the snacks are going and how you're going to take care of them. And then, there's so many other snacks to choose from as well. So test them out. I mean, throw them in the freezer overnight, see what happens the next day when you take them out and try them. Chips and stuff like that might be fine. Cookies I think are a really good option. So, test them out and see what happens. Okay. We're going to move into, now we're going to move into medical emergencies, and these are exactly what we're trying to provide. So all the tips that I've been giving you tonight, particularly about layering, hydration, snacks, what to do to get stuck out there, it's to prevent medical situations like these. Now, they can happen. So let's talk a little bit about what to look for and what to do if it happens if you're out there. And it could happen to you, it could happen to a hiking partner, or you may come upon another hiker who's in distress. I do highly recommend to all hikers if you could take a wilderness first aid training course to do so. Sometimes they require you to take regular first aid and CPR before you take the class. It's very helpful because wilderness first aid training really helps you assess your situation. And not only does it help you treat the condition, or, administer first aid, but it helps you assess the situation. Do you move the person? Do you keep the person there? Do you send for help? Like, how do you come to that decision? And so, and it's really helpful to have that information so that, if you find yourself in an emergency, you know what to do. So our AT Community Committee offers that training at least once a year. Actually, it's been more in demand, so it'll probably be offered twice a year. But I do recommend everybody take that course. So let's first talk about dehydration. And obviously that occurs when, you're not getting enough fluid intake. So the first signs are dry skin, dry lips and mouth, dizziness, a rapid pulse, rapid breathing, fatigue, confusion, irritability, fainting, dark urine output. So, something to keep an eye on for yourself or your hiking partner. As a hike leader, I will tell you that these are things that I'm routinely checking out my fellow hikers. They don't know it, but every so often I'm just going to give them a once over to make sure that they're not showing any signs of distress. And if I think they are, I might gently suggest we have a water break or grab a snack or something that might be needed. If you notice yourself or a hiker is dehydrated, obviously it's easier to prevent than to treat, but making sure that you drink at regular intervals if you don't feel thirsty is helpful. The other thing that's helpful, and I should have mentioned this in the personal first aid kit, I always carry as well electrolytes. So you can, even if it's just a package of Propel, and they come in single-use packets, you can buy it at Walmart or Martin's. But if there's another electrolyte that works for you, great. Or you can just make a solution in a little baggie, a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and 4 teaspoons of sugar or honey. And that solution, so again, a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, a 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda, and 4 teaspoons of sugar. That in a liter of water can be used to replace salt and fluids. So you can even put that in a little snack baggie and throw it in your first aid kit, or put in some of those single-use Propels or Vitalife, or there's so many different options on the market, what works for you. If I'm going on a really long day hike and I know I'm going to be out there, I will start my morning off at home with 8 ounces of water with electrolytes in it. And I do that either whether it's the winter or the summer, because it's real important to maintain those levels in your body. So if somebody is dehydrated, they should take small sips of water. They shouldn't be chugging a whole Nalgene of water. Small sips of water, just reintroducing the water slowly. If you do have electrolytes or that solution, that can be used as well. If the victim vomits or gets nauseated, just stop the water for a little bit until they start to feel better, and then restart the fluids again until, as long as it can be tolerated. This is real important to keep in mind, because dehydration affects your body heat regulation, and you'll be more susceptible to hypothermia when you're dehydrated. So it is real important. I'm going to emphasize again, drink the water. Please do that. Please carry, and please carry enough. Look at the length of your hike. A lot of day packs these days have a sleeve in it. You can put the bladder in it, and you have the tube, and it makes it real easy. Some considerations for cold weather is how do you keep that from freezing? And I know that for those packs and those bladders, there are other pieces of gear that you put over that insulate the tube and the bladder so that the water won't freeze. So let's talk about the next item, the medical emergency that can occur after dehydration, and that's hypothermia. And things that can cause hypothermia, again, are dehydration, cold temperatures, improper clothing and equipment for changing weather conditions, wetness. So that's why we talk about monitoring your sweat, fatigue and exhaustion, inadequate food intake. And the other thing to think about too, alcohol. I know some people take little nips with them, but alcohol intake expands your blood vessels, so that can lead to increased heat loss as well. So maybe not the best idea during winter hiking. Save that for your summer adventures. So some signs and symptoms of hypothermia, and we'll start with mild hypothermia. And the first sign would be shivering. And then it's the umbles. This always makes me laugh, but it's the umbles. So you start with fumbles, inability to complete complex tasks. Like maybe you can't count backwards from 9 by 9s from 100. It might be that you're trying to just hang something up and tie a knot, and you just can't seem to get those strings to move. You know, you just can't function. Next is the grumbles, and that's confusion, apathy, sluggish thinking. Mumbles, which is slurred speech, or the stumbles, which is altered gait. As hypothermia worsens and you're moving into what we call moderate hypothermia, the umbles get worse. And there's now uncontrolled violent shivering, and maybe some really unusual behavior develops. And judgment becomes really impaired. And that may be, you might be I was with somebody once who finally got this person into a shelter, trying to get this person out of their wet clothing, just trying to find their extra clothing in their pack. They had just pulled everything out, everything scattered, and you know, it took great effort to get them changed into warm clothing and to get some warm food and stuff into them, because they just couldn't think clearly. Just something to think about. In severe hypothermia, the shivering actually stops. So if somebody's going really shivering uncontrollably and then it stops, and then there's muscle rigidity, and their mental state completely worsens. Maybe they go from a stupor to coma. They go from semi-conscious to unconscious. Their pulse and respiration may be really difficult to detect. Now you know you're in a really serious situation. So if you have somebody in a really serious hypothermic situation, then you should hopefully have already detected it and have taken steps to treat it. If you have mild or moderate hypothermia, then change the environment to prevent heat loss, get them out of their wet clothes, put something dry on, move them out of the wind. If you can create some sort of shelter or find some sort of shelter break, that's safe from the wind, put them there. Cover any exposed skin, including the head and neck. If you're able, provide them with some simple carbohydrates to help with production. Don't give caffeine or alcohol at all. Insulate them from the ground. Get them in dry insulation. If necessary, have them snuggle with warm people. We've probably heard that before. Get them bundled up, get all the heat going. If you have an algae that you can kill with hot water, put that near their heart. If you have some chemical pads, put it near their heart, in their armpits or in the groin area. If you have the option of them moving still, if they can still move around, keep them moving. After the initial stages of care, keep them moving, because the blood moving will help generate heat. If they are severely hypothermic, be really gentle with them. Rough handling can overload a cold heart and stop it. If CPR is needed, then that's an option. Keep them warm. Warm the body slowly. Create a hypothermia wrap. So wrap them in whatever you have, whether it's a tent fly, sheet plastic, garbage bags, anything. Wrap them to be like a cocoon or burrito with just their mouth and nose exposed. Don't force food or drink. Care for them even if they appear to be dead, because it just might be that you just can't detect the heart rate. And as soon as you realize somebody's in this severe condition, you need to call for help or somehow make a decision on how to get help. And don't try to evacuate them yourself unless it can be done gently. Okay. The last thing I'm going to cover real quick is frostbite. And real quick, prickly feeling, numbness. Your skin looks waxy looking. It could be red, white, blue, or gray yellow. There's muscle stiffness. And when you rewarm the area, there might be blistering. The affected part may turn black and show signs of deep tissue damage. And the most common areas are your fingers, toes, nose, ears, cheeks, and chin. And some people forget, because of windburn or chill, you may not realize that certain areas are frostbitten until somebody else looks at you and goes, "Oh, what's going on with your face? What's that on your nose?" And then you might realize at that point that you're frostbitten. Quick treatment. Handle affected area gently. Never rub an affected area, because that could cause further damage. Just protect from further exposure. Treat for hypothermia. Do not attempt rewarming if there's a chance of refreezing, or help is more than 2 hours away. For minor frostbite, just rewarm rapidly using skin-to-skin contact, and just, like this, no rubbing, just skin to skin. And then for more serious frostbite, Slowly rewarm the body part by soaking it in water not warmer than 105 degrees Fahrenheit. Keep the part in water until normal color returns and it feels warm. Then loosely bandage the area with a dry sterile dressing. Put gauze between affected fingers and toes. And if there are any blisters that develop, don't break them. Okay. That's the end of all of our tips. This is actually Mount Katahdin, which is the northern terminus of the Appalachian Trail. And this is the view of it in winter. And I know there are quite a few people that dream of reaching this point, hopefully. But I can tell you in the winter, they close down the park. So I'm not going to get there in the middle of winter. Just want to thank everyone. If anybody has any questions, I know we're beyond the 8 o'clock hour, but if anybody has some questions about anything we covered tonight, I'd be willing to stay on a little bit longer and answer those questions.
I have a question, Susan.
Sure.
What's the most unusual situation you've run into with winter hiking?
What do you mean by most unusual? Like a medical condition or just something?
Just something that surprised you.
Oh, something that surprised me.
It could be in a good way.
Well, I will say that that situation where I was with a hiker who was hypothermic was surprising and was not fun, but it all turned out well. But I'd say on the trail, I'm constantly surprised. Sometimes it's finding mushrooms that I can't believe are growing in the middle of winter. It's, you know, or I follow, I remember once I followed some tracks and came to a space where clearly there had been some sort of struggle, you know, it's the circle of life, and some bird had found a small rodent and, you know, had lunch. So that was kind of a unique find. And sometimes that's why I follow the tracks. I'm wondering what the animals are after. Where are they going? Are they going back home? Or is there some cache of nuts or something they're after? Sometimes it's like you see in through the snow and you can see where an animal has dug down and you can see where it's pulled the dirt out. And you're like, was that where the nuts are hidden? You know, something like that. I think the other thing that always amazes me are the views. The one thing about winter hiking that sometimes just leaves me speechless is because all the vegetation are off the trees, you can really see the contours of the land. And you can see where the trail goes up and down and curves and you know, drops out of sight to reappear. Like it's just a completely different viewscape, and it's always a different experience, and it's just wonderful. And then this last picture, by the way, is actually I happened to stumble upon this holly tree. It was Christmas Day, a holly tree with red berries on it. Like what a gift, you know. I didn't know that holly tree was there. It's a trail that I hike all the time, but on this particular day I found it. So I think that's the wonders of winter hiking or any hiking, is that you never know what you're going to find. You might find an unusual bird or animal or, you know, mushroom, or just a beautiful place to sit and contemplate life. Yeah, it's one of the reasons I'm out there year round, because it's always something new to experience.
Great. Are there any questions? Your information was incredibly detailed and useful. We have one request to, I think it's from Lisa, to share your, if you'd share your slides, copies of your slides.
Sure. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Are there any other questions, comments?
All right. Well, I thank everybody for attending tonight. See some very friendly faces. Some of the ladies here, we hike regularly together, so it's wonderful to see them here. And I appreciate everybody else who joined. If you do have any other questions there, or any questions about the AT Community Committee as well, I'm going to put here in my last entry here to everyone, thanking you. But feel free, if you have any other questions or anything questions about the AT Community Committee, you can email me. At that address, WCFRAT, that's Warren County Front Royal AT, @gmail.com. And I'd be happy to answer any other questions or anything else you would like to talk about.